Will you pray with me? Loving God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be good before you. Amen. There is this, there's this strange and sometimes unsettling phrase used in the Holy Land. You hear it time and again at sacred sites. This is where tradition tells us that fill in the blank thing happened. This is where tradition tells us Jesus looked over the city and wept. This is where tradition tells us Jesus spoke the Beatitudes. Often there is little or no proof. No archaeological evidence, just a vague location and a long history of stories passed down which sustain the tradition, but not necessarily the facts. Many holy sites were established around the time of the Crusades, which, keep in mind, didn't begin until 1,000 years after the death and resurrection. So hearing that phrase is something you either become accustomed to or not. It requires a certain kind of mental and spiritual gymnastics when you realize that even some of the most important locations in Christian history may have actually been lost to the amnesia of time. The tomb where Jesus was placed after his death has not one, but two pilgrimage sites that claim to mark that climactic moment. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, recognized by most pilgrims as authentic, or at least tradition tells us that. And the Garden Tomb, a quiet, tranquil site near a skull-shaped outcropping in a nearby cliff. Remember, Golgotha means place of the skull. The site of the resurrection itself. Are you tracking with me? The site of the resurrection itself. And it's not clear if one, the other, or neither is the actual location. And in some ways, this fuzzy reality doesn't matter. Consider the spirit with which millions of pilgrims approach these sites. The sacred expectation those pilgrims bring, their collective soulful attention is what makes the sites holy, not the precise location. Think about it. We might say something similar about the meeting house. This sanctuary doesn't date back to 1630, but our congregation does. This is our spiritual home, but not the original structure. We worship in this meeting house. We find community here, but it's not the actual physical building in which our congregation first began. And honestly, I think that is where Psalm 122 meets us today. It doesn't ask us to love a place because we can prove every detail of its history. It asks us to become pilgrims, people who orient our lives toward God's peace, God's justice, and God's homecoming promise. And I recognize there were only 3 chapters of 15 into the Psalms of Ascent, and already we're singing about Jerusalem, even though Jerusalem is still the destination in our summer series. But I'm getting a lot of amens, and let me tell you, as a Baptist preacher, I appreciate every one of them. Jerusalem's still a destination, but maybe that's the point. Jerusalem is not only the place at the end of the road, Jerusalem is the vision that keeps pilgrims walking. We keep the holy city before us so the journey itself can be shaped by the peace that we seek. And we can be honest about the problems associated with that vision. The Holy Land is marked not only by prayer, but Lord, it is marked by grief and war and generations of violence. The ongoing suffering of Palestinians and Jews should give us pause. So should the broader human tendency to claim ownership over whatever we call holy, as if holiness can be possessed, guarded, controlled, weaponized. When I visited the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, I was surprised to learn that 6 Christian sects have responsibility for its care. 6. There has been so much conflict between these sects that the keys to the front door have not been entrusted to Christians, but to Muslim families since the 7th century because of that conflict. While I was there, for all of 15 minutes, a small fight broke out between monks from 2 of the Christian sects, and the police were called and the building evacuated. The building, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the site where tradition tells us the garden tomb exists, was evacuated. Later we learned that one monk had swept stairs not technically under that Christian sect's care, and a fist fight ensued. Sacred places can become battlefields when we confuse reverence with control. And yet, even through the vain imperfections of humanity, the deeper vision remains. Jerusalem still names our longing for a spiritual home where peace is practiced, not possessed. So the question before us is not where is Jerusalem? The question is, what is our Jerusalem? Is it heaven? Is it this sanctuary? Is it home? Is it justice? Is it healing? Or could Jerusalem be the pilgrimage route itself, the way of being we practice when journeying towards God together? When we hear tradition tells us that fill in the blank happened here, we're reminded that the idea is holy. That we don't need to prove without a shadow of a doubt that a particular miracle happened in this spot for it to take on sacred meaning. And that gives us powerful flexibility to manifest our own place of divine inspiration, peace, equity, harmony, and safety by imagining that it exists somewhere. Everywhere? Yesterday marked the 250th anniversary of the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. Fireworks are illegal in Connecticut. It was hard to tell last night at our house because they were everywhere. It's an opportunity to remember that the New England colonies were considered a New Jerusalem for Puritans, also called pilgrims. Fleeing religious persecution in England, they viewed themselves as God's chosen people, called to build a purified city on a hill in the American wilderness, establishing the New Jerusalem on earth. Early founders famously designed the layout of the New Haven colony to mimic the biblical description of the New Jerusalem and Solomon's temple. You can still see it if you go and stand on the green. And look, I will be the first to admit that Al Beam can offer a better and more succinct history of this than I can. But as we approach our 400th anniversary as a worshiping body, let's note that Windsor, founded by Puritans in 1633, was deeply embedded in the same religious vision. And over time, this religious vision of the New England colonies expanded into a broader cultural myth that America itself was a chosen land destined to be a beacon of liberty and justice designated by God, God's self. Now, at its best, that dream can call people toward courage and sacrifice and public good. At its worst, it can convince us that our nation, our tribe, or our preferred version of history has a divine right to rule. And that is where the dream of the city on a hill can bend toward Christian nationalism rather than the true peace of Jerusalem. So let me bring my question closer to home. What is your Jerusalem? Not the Jerusalem you can own or use to prove that you are right and someone else is wrong. What is the Jerusalem that calls you toward wholeness? What's the place, the hope, the practice or promise where you experience a spiritual home where safety is not a privilege but a sacred right bestowed by a God who loves you deeply? What is your Jerusalem? What is your greatest hope? Your greatest dream? Your greatest desire? Jerusalem doesn't have to be a place. It can be freedom. It can be oneness with God, harmony with neighbors, the end of painful treatments, a fresh start, the exhale of a Sabbath moment, the end of an abusive relationship, the first days with a new child, the first hours out from beneath the hazy clouds of chemicals. What is your Jerusalem? And perhaps another question is not simply, how do you attain it? But how do we walk there together? How do we help one another practice peace before we arrive? How do we become people who recognize holiness when God lets us glimpse it? Because Psalm 122 does not simply admire Jerusalem from a distance. It prays for it. It seeks Jerusalem's peace. It imagines a community where people can gather, belong, worship, and be made whole, no matter who they are or where they are on life's journey. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem, the psalmist says. Perhaps that prayer begins wherever we are. In the sanctuary, at our communion table, in hospital rooms, in difficult conversation, in acts of forgiveness, in acts of courage, in our radical welcome. Your Jerusalem may not be a city, a sanctuary. It may not be a place on a map. It may be healing, freedom, reconciliation, sobriety, home, or the deep breath you have not been able to take for a very long time. Whatever it is, hear this good news. You do not have to walk there alone. We are pilgrims together. We practice peace together. We learn by the grace of God how to become people who do not simply dream of Jerusalem, but seek its good around us. So how can we help you get there? What prayer can we offer? When do you need us to carry you there? When do you need us to carry you there? Think about it while we continue to walk together. Amen.